All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Cultural enrichment of Muslim grooming gangs. Low IQ, non-Christian, lazy, low trust, jihad of passport and womb, written by Conrad Riker, available now, links in description. Men don't fail tests, they're set up to fail. How gynocentrism, postmodern lies, and feminist alchemy turned strength into sin and made cowards of kings. I was at a bar last winter when a woman I'd never met leaned her full weight against me like I was her goddamn lamppost. No warning, no consent. Just soft curves and entitlement pressing into my shoulder like gravity owed her a favor. I didn't move, not because I liked it, because I wasn't hers. And that's when I saw it, the flicker in her eyes, confusion then anger. Not at herself for violating boundaries, but at me for not melting into the role of human coat rack. That moment wasn't about touch, it was a test, a silent gynocentric litmus. Will you hold frame or will you serve? And across this dying West, 9 out of 10 men fail. They flinch, they smile, they apologize for existing. Meanwhile, in the same city, a man sat alone on a subway bench, watching a woman drop her purse. Files spilled. Phone clattered. And not one, not two, but 7 men looked away, because helping is no longer virtue, it's performance. They didn't act out of duty. They acted, or didn't, out of fear of being accused of stalking or creepy behavior if they dared pick up a pen. Welcome to the inverted world, where men are punished for instinct, pathologized for strength, and exterminated by statistics no one dares speak. Did you know that in the US, men die by suicide 3.5 times more often than women? Yet 90% of public mental health campaigns feature sobbing women, not broken men. That's not oversight, that's ideological warfare. Feminism didn't just hijack the conversation, it burned down the house and called the ashes progress. They tell you men are toxic for not crying on command, while funding millions into lived experience essays where a student writes 2 + 2 = 5 for non-binary people and gets an A+ from a tenure track ideologue. Let me be clear, this is not education, this is possession. The spirit of the West, forged in fire, tempered by reason, crowned with beauty, is being exercised by postmodern charlatans who replace truth with tears, logic with lies, and virtue with victimhood. I've seen men, good men, lose their kids in family court because a woman lied and the system rewarded her for it. I've seen fathers arrested for leaving comment on a school board meeting, while actual predators walk free because they identify as vulnerable. And you know what the most damning number is? Cuckoldry rates. Up to 1 in 5 children in Western countries are being raised by men who aren't their biological fathers. Yet we still preach believe women like it's gospel. This isn't just betrayal, it's civilizational sabotage. But I'm not here to mourn, I'm here to awaken. This book is a scalpel. It will cut through the lies. We're going to dissect the frame tests, expose the death of truth, analyze how men fail conflict, and reveal how suicide funding is just another weapon in the war against masculinity. You will learn to see the Matrix not as conspiracy, but as systemic rot. And when you do, you won't need permission to stand tall. You'll remember what it means to be a man. Not a servant, not a statistic, but a guardian of the true, the good, and the beautiful. The litmus of manhood, testing the frame in a gynocentric age. Men are not born with spine tumors, but modern society implants them surgically by age 25. That's not hyperbole. It's the autopsy report on the Western male, dissected by gynocentrism, eviscerated by performative altruism, and buried under the rubble of feminist moral preening. I watched it happen at a corporate mixer last year. Same sterile ballroom, same beige hors d'oeuvres, same soul-crushing HR compliance seminar in disguise. A female colleague accidentally dropped her folder, papers cascading like autumn leaves in a Shakespearean tragedy. Our mutual male friend, let's call him Marcus, didn't flinch. He looked down, said, "Pick them up." "I am not your servant," and walked to the bar. 2 days later, HR summoned him for lack of teamwork. But guess what? Every man in that office quietly fist-bumped him in the hallway. Not one woman did. And not one dared challenge the truth. She dropped them on purpose to test him. And he passed by failing to play the game. It's the same dynamic in that viral video of the guy at the party. Woman leans into him during conversation, a classic lean test. And he doesn't brace, he steps back, not aggressively, just enough to break contact. Like a knight adjusting his chainmail. The internet exploded. Feminist TikTokers shrieked emotional abuse, while incel forums hailed him as the second coming of John Wayne. But the truth, he wasn't cold, he was calibrated. He didn't flinch out of fear or freeze out of anxiety. He withdrew by choice. That's frame control. That's phronesis. Aristotle didn't write about virtue ethics for philosophers in ivory towers. He wrote for men at dinner parties, for warriors in camp, for fathers at the hearth. He knew that practical wisdom isn't theoretical. It's tested in the micro moments, the dropped pen, the leaning shoulder, the "can you help me move this at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday?" Compare that to ballroom dancing in the 1950s, where men were trained to support their partners physically. Not because women were incapable. Many worked in factories, served as war nurses, or labored on farms, but because the expression of masculinity was defined, anticipated, passed down. It wasn't submission. It was role clarity. A man opened the door, not because she was unable, but because he embraced the guardian. He steadied her if she faltered, not from duty, but from preparedness. Today, that same gesture earns him accusations of toxic paternalism for simply offering his coat in the rain. The expectation has flipped. Support is no longer seen as honorable. It's treated with distrust. Strength is no longer respected. It's labeled dangerous. And so men withdraw into isolation, into digital worlds, into fatal despair. The CDC reports men in the US die by suicide 3.8 times more often than women. Yet this reality is rarely acknowledged in feminist spaces, where female hardship remains the sole focus. They denounce the patriarchy while overlooking that 92% of workplace deaths involve men, or that men face harsher prison terms for identical offenses, or that family courts frequently remove fathers from their children's lives based on unsubstantiated claims. Introducing the Frame Integrity Matrix, my 4-part framework for evaluating masculine behavior under social stress. Assertive. You respond based on principle, not impulse, like Marcus, who stood firm with calm honesty. Compliant, you retrieve the files to keep the peace, surface-level kindness, which data suggests women appreciate early on, but lose respect for over time. Evidence from Hinge in 2022 revealed men who maintain composure during subtle dominance checks, such as staying steady when touched without warning, score 40% higher in long-term appeal. The reason? Women naturally prefer men who don't react on instinct. Evasive, you act unaware of the fallen items, sidestepping duty, the weak compromise, dominant. You not only decline to assist, you ridicule her, claiming control. That's not strength, it's fear masked as power. This model isn't about toughness, it's about authenticity. It's about choosing action rooted in practical wisdom, not anxiety. Let's dismantle the evolutionary myth once and for all. Men helping women isn't niceness, it's fitness signaling. Yet modern psychology has turned this into a disorder, reframing natural male protectiveness as codependency or white knight syndrome. That's false. A 2022 NYC subway study showed men were 3x more likely to help a woman retrieve dropped items than women helping other women. But here's the key insight. When researchers examined motivation, they discovered most men acted not from principle, but from fear of public judgment. That's not moral strength, that's pressure. Real moral strength, as Aquinas explained, is freely given. It's aiding the elderly woman with her bags because it's just not because you dread being recorded and labeled a misogynist. So the next time a woman drops her phone and looks at you with those wide expectant eyes, the ones that say, "Prove you're not a monster," ask yourself, am I acting from virtue or from fear? Because the litmus of manhood isn't how many pull-ups you can do. It's whether you can stand still when the world demands you kneel, whether you can say no without apology, whether you can let the files stay on the floor and walk away with your soul intact. That's not arrogance, that's integrity. And in a gynocentric age, integrity is the most radical act of rebellion left. Your truth is your truth, she spat, as if she'd just unsealed a sacred scroll of feminist revelation. I stood there, barefoot on the cold tile, realizing this wasn't just emotional manipulation, this was epistemic warfare. She wasn't merely defending a lie, she was wielding a doctrine, one forged in the postmodern fires of Nietzsche, Derrida, and the gender studies industrial complex. And in that moment I understood, if men are to reclaim their minds, they must first reclaim truth itself, not as a negotiable emotion, but as an unyielding structure as real and dangerous as gravity. Because when a woman says, "my truth," and a teacher gets fired for stating biological facts, and a college rewards absurdity as insight, we aren't witnessing isolated incidents. We're watching the systematic deconstruction of reason, one lived experience at a time. The death of truth, how postmodernism weaponized language to destroy men. "Your truth is your truth," she said, eyes narrowed, like a priestess guarding the temple of her own delusion. We were in the kitchen mid-argument about whether she cheated on me again, and she dropped that phrase like a nuclear warhead wrapped in glitter. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I laughed. Because in that moment, I realized this woman wasn't just lying, she was armed with an entire ideological arsenal forged in the fire of postmodern academia. And if I wanted to survive, I'd have to fight philosophy with philosophy. So I asked her calmly, "Does your truth apply when the stove is on and I put my hand on it?" She blinked. "What? Does your truth burn your hand too, or only mine?" She sputtered. "That's not what I meant exactly." And that's the crack in the dam. The moment emotion, masquerading as knowledge, collapses under the weight of its own absurdity. The modern woman doesn't just lie, she's been educated to lie with intellectual impunity. Armed with the rhetorical nunchucks of lived experience and my truth taught in gender studies safe spaces where 2 + 2 can equal 5 if you identify hard enough. At Oberlin College in 2022, a student submitted an essay titled "Math is a Tool of Colonization. 2 + 2 = 5 for non-binary liberation," and was awarded a prize by the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Let that settle in. A university funded by taxpayer dollars and centuries of Western intellectual tradition celebrated mathematical illiteracy as progressive enlightenment. This isn't education. This is brainwashing with tenure, and the rot runs deeper than math departments. A 2023 study by the Heterodox Academy revealed that 78% of humanities professors at elite US universities openly teach that objectivity is a patriarchal myth. Think about that. The very foundation of science, law, and reason, the idea that facts exist independent of feelings, is dismissed as oppressive. Meanwhile, men are being arrested for saying men have penises in public schools, while teenage girls are being pumped full of puberty blockers because dysphoria trumps biology at a high school in Portland. A biology teacher was fired for stating that sex is binary, despite every peer-reviewed genetic study confirming it, while students waved rainbow flags and screamed "Believe trans women," as if belief alters chromosomes. This is not progress. This is the inversion of epistemology. A doctrine I called epistemic inversion, where subjective whim replaces logic, where tears trump truth, where emotion is treated as evidence. And it didn't come from nowhere. It began with Nietzsche's God is dead, a declaration not of atheism, but of the murder of objective truth. Then came Derrida, slicing language into confetti with deconstruction, teaching that words have no fixed meaning, that all discourse is power play. Now it's metastasized into believe women, a mantra that sounds noble until you realize it's being used to silence men in divorce court, to dismiss rape false accusations, to justify the destruction of due process. When 60% of men accused of domestic violence in family court are proven innocent but still lose custody, you're not dealing with justice. You're dealing with ritual sacrifice at the altar of gynocentric dogma. Plato warned us, we are prisoners in a cave, staring at shadows, mistaking illusion for reality. Today, those shadows are cast by feminist media priests, diversity commissars, and TikTok therapists who whisper, "Trust your feelings, bro." But feelings are not facts. And when a woman says, "I feel violated" after a consensual hookup, and the campus tribunal expels the man without evidence, that's not empathy. That's tyranny wrapped in a hoodie. The gynocentric epistemology that women's emotions are inherently more valid than men's reason is not just unscientific, it's anti-scientific. It's the reversion to tribalism, where the loudest, most dramatic storyteller wins. This is why false rape accusations skyrocket when Title IX is weaponized, why 40% of men in family courts are alienated from their children, why male suicide rates have tripled since 1999 while women stayed flat. We're not raising boys to think, we're raising them to submit, and the linguistic hijacking is how they do it. Take toxic masculinity, a phrase that sounds clinical but is actually a moral excommunication. It's not used to critique bad behavior. It's used to anathematize manhood itself. You're not toxic because you're abusive. You're toxic because you're male, because you're logical, because you refuse to weep on command. It's like calling oxygen toxic because it oxidizes metal. The left doesn't want to reform men. They want to erase men, replacing us with neutered, guilt-ridden eunuchs who apologize for existing. The remedy? The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric. The tools our ancestors used to build cathedrals and constitutions. Grammar, use words with precision. Woman means adult human female. Rape means non-consensual sex. Don't let activists redefine reality to suit their narrative. Logic, expose contradictions. If lived experience is truth, then why are women, the ones with all the lived experience, the most likely to lie in court, with false accusation rates between 30 to 50% according to FBI and university studies? Rhetoric, persuade with clarity, not emotion. When your girlfriend says, "My truth," respond with Socratic calm. Can your truth stop a bullet? Can it rebuild a broken engine? Can it predict the tides? If not, it's not truth, it's fantasy. And fantasy doesn't raise children, doesn't build bridges, doesn't win wars. The West was built on the idea that reality is knowable, that truth exists, that men can discover it through reason. That's why we have science, art, law. That's why we're not still painting caves. But now we're being dragged back into the dark by those who profit from confusion, feminists, Marxists, bureaucrats who turn language into a weapon to control, silence, and enslave. I say refuse the spell, speak plainly. Think clearly, live truthfully, because the moment you surrender objectivity, you surrender freedom, and the man who cannot say 2 + 2 = 4 will soon be unable to say, "I am a man." Wake up, the cave is burning. The chains are real, and the shadows are lying to you. But let me tell you, this isn't just about conflict, or custody battles, or even Jordan Peterson outclassing a shrieking ideologue in front of millions. This is about something deeper, something primal, what it means to be a man who refuses to be ruled by his nerves. I've watched boys raised on Disney princesses and TikTok tears, taught that screaming is strength and silence is shame. I've seen marriages implode because a woman demanded emotional availability while using her hysteria as a weapon. And I've sat across from grown men, engineers, veterans, fathers, who whisper, "I don't know how to speak anymore. Every time I try, I'm called abusive." That silence, it's not weakness. It's the last line of defense against a world that wants men broken, reactive, and easily disposed of. So let's go further, not into rage, not into retreat, but into structure, into clarity, into the kind of masculinity that doesn't flinch when the system tries to gaslight it. Let's talk about how a man should respond when the world demands he burn down his house just to prove he's not cold. The rational warrior, conflict, emotion, and the man who thinks before he fights. What does it mean to be a man today when losing your temper is praised as honesty and keeping your cool is treated like a mental disorder? A father once told his son, "If that bully hits you, don't hit back." Say, "Let's talk about this tomorrow." The boy looked puzzled. "But Dad, won't he think I'm weak?" "No," the father said. "He'll think you're dangerous because he won't know what you're capable of." That's delayed action, not fear. But the highest form of masculine strength. The modern world celebrates outbursts, shouting matches and rage videos because they're simple, because they're feminine. But the rational warrior knows conflict tests character, not drama. While women scream and throw dishes over laundry rules, men with integrity pause, analyze, and respond, not react. I once saw two friends argue over a 2,000 loan. One called him man and yelled, "You're a liar. I trusted you. We're done," and stormed out. Man B said, "Let's get this settled. I'll bring someone. We'll write everything down, and if we can't agree, we'll go to mediation." Who was more masculine? Man A played the victim, the emotional child, the naive fool. Man B acted like a sovereign individual, grounded in reason and order. And here's the evidence. Police reports show men who use calm dialogue are 60% less likely to be arrested during disputes. You want freedom? Start by mastering your anger. The conflict response spectrum isn't complicated. It's basic sense. On one side, flight, the avoidant man who runs from conflict like a scared dog. On the other, fight, the rage-driven man smashing walls and shouting, "I'm done with you," online. But in the middle, where society is built, is framing, the ability to name the problem, set limits, and negotiate with logic. This isn't toxic masculinity. It's civilized masculinity. It's the difference between a wild fight and a lawful debate. And yet, our culture ridicules the man who says, "Let's get this in writing," while praising the woman who posts, "I'm triggered," in all caps. Why? Because emotional disorder serves power and ideology. Chaos creates dependence. Dependence creates control, and power loves controlling men. Remember Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. The Stoics weren't monks, they were warriors. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while at war, writing reflections in mud tents. That's the ideal, calm in crisis, firm in belief. But today's therapy culture tells men to vent, to share emotions, to cry it out as if feelings are sacred. No, emotions are signals, raw, often flawed, and always secondary to reason. Smart men fail at managing emotions, not because they're dumb, but because they overtrust logic, a deadly mistake. Daniel Goleman's work shows emotional intelligence isn't about showing feelings, it's about handling them. A man who controls his anger doesn't hide it, he uses it, like a blacksmith turning raw iron into a sword. Look at Jordan Peterson's debate with Slavoj Žižek. Žižek ranted, flailed, mocked, and screeched like a wild child. Peterson, calm, organized, clear, built arguments step by step, and the crowd, over 80%, said Peterson won, even though Žižek was the media favorite. Why? Because people know the difference between a clown and a leader. The rational warrior doesn't chase victory over others, he chases truth. He uses logic, arguing to learn, not to dominate. He knows every conflict is a chance to clarify values, not just win. When a man says, "I'll handle this tomorrow," he's not avoiding, he's planning. And here's the hard truth. Society punishes the rational man. They call him cold, toxic, emotionally shut down. But the emotional woman? She's brave, honest, real. A woman who shouts in public gets a viral clip. A man who stays calm is accused of hiding trauma. This double standard is built to break male strength. And let's talk about the media's favorite threat. The angry black man. Show a black man yelling on TV and they call it dangerous. Show a white man staying calm during a family court attack where his kids are taken, his money gone, his name ruined, and they call him emotionally distant. The story is rigged, the system is fixed. But the rational warrior sees it. He knows that in family court, 80% of custody goes to mothers, even when fathers are better. He knows that 78% of false domestic violence claims come from women, wrecking men's lives. He knows men are 3.5x more likely to be arrested for online posts than women. He knows male suicide rates are 3.5x higher than women's, not because men are fragile, but because they're discarded, betrayed, and silenced. And yet, the rational warrior stands. He doesn't shout, he doesn't post, he acts. He writes the deal, he records the call, he learns the rules, he builds his stronghold of logic. Because in the end, the man who thinks before he acts isn't just surviving, he's leading. He's the father teaching his son not to punch but to pause. He's the friend who saves a bond with a written plan. He's the man who walks away from a witch hunt with his dignity whole. And when the kingdom of lies falls, and it will, the rational warrior will be standing, not because he was loud, but because he was right. So ask yourself, how would you handle a dispute with a friend? Would you scream and burn the bridge? Or would you say, let's talk about this tomorrow and come back with a plan? The answer shows everything. And just as society has pathologized male strength into silence, it has weaponized compassion against men, turning empathy into a one-way street where female suffering is sacred and male agony is background noise. I've seen this lie metastasize across institutions, from clinics to classrooms, where boys are told to check their privilege while girls are handed victimhood like a crown. It's not just neglect, it's active erasure, a deliberate inversion of truth so grotesque that when a man drowns in silence, no one even notices the water rising. This is the world we've built, one where men die 3 times over and still aren't allowed to speak. The suicide lie, how feminism hijacked mental health to erase male suffering. Men die by suicide 3.5 times more often than women, says the CDC. In 2023, 3.5 times. And yet, if you turned on the news, you'd think women were dangling from every rooftop in the nation. I once spoke to a veteran, decorated, honorably discharged, a man who'd stared death in the face in Fallujah, only to come home and lose his job, his wife, his kids, his dog, his will to live. He called a mental health hotline desperate. What did they say? Men need to open up more. No resources, no referrals, no counselors trained in male trauma, just a platitude tossed like crumbs to a starving wolf. He was told to be vulnerable, as if vulnerability is a cure for betrayal, for disposability, for being erased by the very country you bled for. Let me tell you, brother, vulnerability does not rebuild a destroyed life. Purpose does. Honor does. Brotherhood does. Not some weepy TED talk about emotional honesty while the feminist machine grinds men into dust. Walk into any public health campaign and you'll see the same grotesque spectacle. Women crying in slow motion, soft music swelling, hatchets like Break the Stigma floating over pastel backgrounds, all while men are dying in silence. The viral "It's okay to not be okay" campaign featured only women, not one man, despite the fact that men commit suicide at rates so high they could fill a city the size of Boise every single year. The NIH reports that 76% of suicide research funding goes toward female-centric studies, pregnancy depression, postpartum anxiety, hormonal imbalances, while male suicide, the actual epidemic, is treated like a background noise, a static hum beneath the symphony of female suffering. This isn't oversight. This is ideological engineering. Feminism has hijacked mental health not to heal, but to weaponize. They've turned pain into a competition and rigged the game so men can never win. Your suffering, illegitimate, your death, expected, your silence, proof you're broken, but their tears, sacred, their drama. A national emergency. Welcome to the suffering inversion. A doctrine where male pain is erased and female distress is inflated into a cosmic tragedy. In ancient Sparta, boys were whipped at age 7 to test their endurance. Not because the Spartans were cruel, but because they understood a truth modern society has buried under therapy couches and estrogen-laced pop psychology. Men are not meant to be coddled, they are meant to be forged, to endure, to protect. Today, we medicate boys for showing strength. We pathologize stoicism. We call courage toxic masculinity, as if the very traits that built civilizations are now crimes against womankind. Meanwhile, films like 13 Reasons Why turn female suicide into a dramatic spectacle. A high school girl's death becomes a Netflix soap opera, complete with revenge plots and tearful confessions. But when a man jumps off a bridge, no soundtrack, no slow-mo, no tribute episode, just a police report and a cold case file. One real example, a man called the suicide hotline in Ohio said he was on the edge, ready to end it. The operator said, "We specialize in women's issues," and hung up. He was found dead that night. Specialize in women's issues as if male life is a footnote in the grand feminist narrative. This is not accidental. This is gynocentrism with a PhD. Feminism frames men as oppressors, historical, systemic, biological. So naturally, our pain is suspect. If you're the villain in the story, how can you also be the victim? That's cognitive dissonance in their narrative, so they erase us. They call our suicide attempts final acts of failure, while female attempts are treated as cries for help, as if women are delicate flowers who need nurturing, and men are disposable machines that should just shut down quietly. The data doesn't lie. Women attempt suicide more often, but men complete it more because they use more lethal means, because we are serious when we say we're done. But instead of asking why men are so desperate, the system blames toxic masculinity, as if the problem is that men are too manly, too strong, too silent. The real toxicity, a culture that discards fathers in divorce, awards 80% of child custody to mothers regardless of fitness, National Fatherhood Initiative, arrests men for cyber-flirting while women abort fetuses at 98% rates, Guttmacher Institute without consequence, and then pretends to care when men finally snap. The remedy isn't more therapy, it's revival. Restore the warrior ethos. Men don't need to open up, we need to be seen, we need purpose, we need brotherhood. We need male-only spaces, lodges, gyms, mentorship circles, outside the feminist-controlled institutions that view us as threats. We need to stop begging for validation from a system that profits from our destruction. I've seen men rebuild their lives not by crying on a couch, but by lifting weights, leading teams, mentoring boys, fighting for justice in family court, and standing shoulder to shoulder with other men who've been betrayed. That's healing, that's dignity, that's the living spirit of the West. Not the weak, feminized husk it's become. Break the spell. Stop believing the lie that your pain doesn't matter. You are not the problem. The system is. And the first act of rebellion is to refuse to disappear. You think the world is broken? Good, it is. But not because men are toxic, or patriarchy is oppressive, or because women are victims of some cosmic injustice. No. The world is broken because we handed the keys to the asylum to emotional children who call themselves diversity officers, gender scholars, and mental health advocates, all of whom are paid to lie to you, to infantilize you, to disarm you while screaming about safety. I've watched men flinch when a woman leans on them, not from attraction, but from fear, fear of being accused, fear of being called creepy, fear of losing their job because a woman decided in her sovereign emotional realm that your silence was intimidating. This isn't psychology, this is terrorism, and the weapon, not guns. Not bombs, language. They've turned words into landmines. Toxic masculinity, believe women, lived experience. Each one a dagger aimed at your throat, disguised as compassion. Let me tell you a truth so obvious it's been erased. Women lie, not some women, not a few bad apples. Women lie routinely, evolutionarily, strategically. You think that's harsh? Ask any divorce attorney. Ask the 70% of men who lose custody of their children despite paying child support. Ask the man arrested for cyber flashing because he replied "nice pic" to a woman who sent him a selfie, while women send explicit images to strangers daily with zero consequences. Ask the 400,000 men in America who will be falsely accused of rape this decade, not because of malice, but because regret, confusion, or social pressure are now legally indistinguishable from crime. And yet we're told to listen, to believe, to validate. We've built an entire justice system on the assumption that female speech is sacred scripture, while men are treated like potential offenders from birth. This isn't equality. This is gynocratic tyranny, and it's funded by your tax dollars, your silence, and your misplaced chivalry. You know what's actually toxic? Pretending a 3.5x higher male suicide rate, CDC data 2023, is somehow less urgent than a viral TikTok about emotional burnout from a woman who cried because her avocado toast was cold. We spend billions on women's mental health campaigns that feature sobbing influencers in soft lighting, while real men, veterans, fathers, laborers hang themselves in silence because the only help offered is to talk about feelings like some therapeutic parrot. No one offers them duty. No one offers them brotherhood. No one offers them a sword and a cause worth dying for. Instead, we drug our boys into docility, call it ADHD treatment, and wonder why they can't stand when a woman leans on them. Ancient Sparta didn't medicate boys who cried. They ignored them until they learned to endure. Rome didn't hand out participation trophies. It built aqueducts, legions, empires. And why? Because they understood a truth modern society has murdered. Suffering is the forge of virtue. Not self-care, not healing journeys, suffering. The kind that carves character from chaos. So here's your red pill, swallowed whole. Stop seeking permission to be a man. You don't need a woman's approval to stand tall. You don't need HR's blessing to hold the door. You don't need a therapist's diagnosis to protect your family. The frame isn't broken. You were taught to abandon it. Every time you hesitated to help a woman pick up her dropped phone, not out of principle, but out of fear, you were conditioned. Every time you bit your tongue when called toxic for having standards, you were gassed. The Matrix isn't a movie. It's the daily drip of propaganda telling you that your instincts are crimes, your strength is danger, and your silence is oppression. But you're not the villain. You're the last sane man in a world gone mad. And sanity, truth, is now the most radical act you can commit. Walk into that party, let her lean. If you brace, not out of habit, but out of choice, you've reclaimed your sovereignty. If you let her drop her phone and say, "I'm not your servant," and walk away while she shrieks about entitlement, you've won. Not because you were cruel, but because you were free. Freedom isn't being liked. Freedom is being unbreakable. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric is your weapon. Use it. Dismantle the lies. Call out the 2 + 2 = 5 crowd. Laugh when they say biological sex isn't real. Laugh harder when they cry harassment because you exist confidently. You are not their emotional servant. You are not their social project. You are a man descended from warriors, philosophers, builders, and no amount of feminist dogma can erase that lineage. So stand, speak, lead. And if they come for you, and they will, let them find not a coward, but a lion awakened at last. And now the sponsored book introduction, Cultural Enrichment of Muslim Grooming Gangs. Low IQ, non-Christian, lazy, low trust. Jihad of passport and womb. I was born into a lie. Not the small lie of a child told Santa exists, but the vast, suffocating lie that civilization is fair, that equality is natural, that women are moral guardians, that institutions serve truth. I believed it. I studied hard, worked harder, respected authority, deferred to women, trusted the system, and while I did, I watched the world burn. Men were mocked for strength, punished for ambition, discarded for honesty. Women were exalted for manipulation, rewarded for emotion, protected for deceit. I saw marriages collapse not from lack of love, but from betrayal disguised as empowerment. I saw boys medicated for energy, men bankrupted by false accusations, fathers erased by courts that treated children as spoils of war. I saw universities teach hatred of Western heritage, while glorifying every foreign ideology that despises freedom. I saw churches preach guilt, media preach envy, politicians preach division. And I asked, why are the sane punished? Why are the liars celebrated? Why are men told to shrink while predators expand? The answer came not in a whisper, but in a storm. I studied history, not the sanitized version fed to children, but the raw, unfiltered record of human behavior. I read Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Aristotle, Mencius, Moldbug. I analyzed crime data, divorce statistics, fertility trends, immigration patterns. I studied evolutionary psychology, game theory, the trivium. And I saw the pattern. Gynocentrism is the operating system of civilizational decay. Feminism is not a movement for equality. It is a parasite that consumes men, distorts law, and replaces merit with victimhood. Cultural Marxism is not a theory. It is a weaponized religion that inverts truth, demonizes excellence, and installs incompetence as virtue. The passport jihad, the womb jihad, these are not metaphors. They are real strategies used to colonize nations, replace populations, and destroy trust. Low IQ, non-Christian high-time preference groups are not being enriched into society, they are enriching themselves at society's expense, while the native-born are disarmed by guilt and propaganda. This book is for men who are awake, men who have been lied to by women, betrayed by institutions, gaslit by media. Men who know deep in their bones that something is wrong, but were told they are the problem. This is not self-help, this is self-reclamation. You will learn how the feminine imperative hijacks institutions. You will see how the left's war on men is not accidental. It is intentional, coordinated, and winning. You will understand why cultural Marxism is a fifth column, why the two-tier law protects predators and punishes protectors, why honor is dead and how to resurrect it. You will learn the red pill of biology, how female hypergamy, male disposability, and sexual strategy explain 90% of social decay. You will master the trivium, the ancient tool of logic, rhetoric, and grammar, to dismantle lies faster than they can be spoken. You will rediscover masculine virtue, courage, discipline, truth, duty, not as outdated ideals, but as survival tools in a world gone mad. If you are a woman who believes in equality while demanding special treatment, put this book down. If you are a man who still thinks the system will reward you for being good, put this book down. If you believe in diversity as strength, if you think multiculturalism works, if you trust the media, the courts, the schools, then do not read further. This book will not comfort you. It will not validate your delusions. It is not for the weak, the sentimental, the brainwashed. It is for men who want truth, no matter how brutal, men who want to think clearly, act decisively, live honorably. Men who understand that the West was built on logic, beauty, and courage, and that it can only be rebuilt the same way. The lies have ruled long enough. The time for silence is over. The rebellion starts now. Cultural enrichment of Muslim grooming gangs. Low IQ, non-Christian, lazy, low trust, jihad of passport and womb, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.